Hello, welcome to The Shaily Show. I'm Shailendra, and you're watching this episode simulcasted live on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. For you to watch this episode and other sessions that run on emerging technologies, I would request you to press the follow button down there so you're alerted when a live session is on. In today's session, I have a very good friend of mine who worked with me once upon a time, and we have some great memories working on some very interesting projects. Angelo Koulos is a senior business consultant with solid change and transformation experience in the areas of banking, finance, technology, sales, and business development. He has over 28 years of experience, predominantly in the banking and finance sector, technology, and business consulting, holding senior positions such as CFO, CIO, COO, and he's very well known for his abilities to manage highly complex change management projects, both at a global and regional level. He's a hands-on individual with a very solid delivery track record and an ability to think outside of the box. And we'll have to discuss that today with him. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome Angelo Koulos to the Shaily Show. Hi, Angelo. How are you?
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to the Shaily Show.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well.
Good stuff.
Coronavirus free.
That's even better. Okay, let's start from the start. Tell me about yourself, your career journey, and then one interesting fact about you. Well, we know a few though.
Yeah, thank you, Shelley. Look, I guess in a nutshell, what makes me a little bit interesting as an individual is that I've not only worked in the last few years within the technology sector, but I began my journey really as an accountant in banking and finance. And as any CFO or COO, you then get involved in all the decisions, technology or otherwise, within a company. And that's exposed me to a number of industries. The last 10 years, as Shelley has touched, we've worked together. I've worked in a large number of both local and international technology consulting firms, and now have my own organization where I'm looking at a number of ventures and also helping customers on their transformation journeys, not only for using technology, but making the decisions about how they bring technology to fruition.
Perfect. Thank you for giving us a brief intro there. So how long have you been working with your current new setup that you've set up? How long has that been?
Yeah, look, I've had my own business in the background on and off for the last 10 years. So I sort of, whenever there's a fire to be fought, I get called in and I'm consulting for various businesses, whether it be in recruitment or in government, banking and finance, in communications, healthcare. So it's been interesting just to see how emerging technologies are touching all these businesses and how then I can apply my practical skills as a finance-orientated person and more general business person to making sure that they get the best outcomes for the business.
Okay, so tell me, what has been the most rewarding example of your what you've been doing in the last few years? Well, take it from either banking or finance sector, which will be more relevant?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question, Shelley, because there's been a number of them that have sort of popped up over my career. But what's really notable is when you are able to make a really simple change in businesses, and it doesn't really depend on how big or I guess the company is or the size or location. It's about understanding what the business actually does. So if I give you very pointed examples, it comes as simply as going into organizations that are very small. They could exist out in a business park, out in suburban Sydney or Melbourne, even overseas, where they're struggling with their connectivity, they're struggling with their data, they've got a lot of paper, they're still doing things on Excel like we all do in corporate. Long live Excel. And the reality is they've got all those daily challenges. So the greatest satisfaction for me is when I come in and we look at the way they do things and find solutions where we can apply those technologies to there. When you're getting into the big end of town, when you're dealing with the large banks and you're dealing with the large telco companies, they're at the bleeding edge. And the same applies there. It's about taking very practical, approaches to how they apply the technology. And where people fall over or organizations fall over is that everyone wants the sexiest thing today.
Yep.
It's about how they invest, how they integrate, and more so how they align people and process together with the technology. And that's probably where you see the greatest failure rates today.
Yep. Okay. Let's talk about something that is very close to both of us, intelligent technologies. So you name them: machine learning, or artificial intelligence is quite a talk, analytics, BI, where intelligence is the core of the whole solution. So tell us, what are you seeing in the market, in the banking and the banking finance sector, and how enterprises are embracing intelligent technologies in this space? So, talk about organizations that you've worked with, or organizations that reach out to you. Just give us a bit of understanding, because you come from the industry as well, as I understand.
Yeah, look, it's not only from banking and finance. So I spent a little bit of time thinking about this. So I thought I'd share some things generally with everybody. I think everybody at the moment has what I call, change fatigue when it comes to emerging technologies. And it's not only for the fact that there's a lot of them out there, some of them very, very exciting and sexy, whether you're looking at artificial intelligence or autonomous driving, or you're looking at robotics and things that are happening, computer vision, extended reality. The terms come up, and I was looking at the Gartner top 20 only again today, and when you hear words like multi-experience and democratization and human augmentation, I mean, I feel really sorry for CIOs out there. It must be really hard, even more so for the CFOs that are going, I'm going to fund this stuff. It's pretty hard. But to answer your question, I think at the end of the day, the thing that really organizations need to do is step back and ask themselves, first of all, have they got the foundational stuff right? And that's where people get it really wrong. They try to introduce these new technologies and they're either not ready, they don't have the right people, and they're not getting the right advice about how to approach them. And in banks, it's really hairy. So you can imagine, they've got legacy systems. They could have ATM networks, or they could be looking at their card systems, and they're not easy to change. You've got millions of people on these platforms. You're dealing with all the hairy things about information and security data, and we all know about that. That's really important. So it's about putting some of the foundational stuff in. But the question that's got to be asked, I think, right now is, using an analogy of the house, do you take the house and renovate it, or do you need to actually blow it all up and start again and do something different? And that's really confronting for businesses that have invested a lot of money and have got balance sheets worth of technology or other assets on there. But I think the reality that what we're seeing, especially in Europe and some of the emerging countries and economies, is that they're taking that approach of building completely brand new and then retiring the old assets altogether and going onto that brand new ship, so to speak. And, when you're dealing in an economy where AI and 5G is coming about, and you've got all these various augmentations that, healthcare uses quite a bit at the moment. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine, they're getting to the point where you could have a doctor in America interfacing with a doctor in Australia. If they've got really fast speeds and networks, they could be using virtual augmentation to be doing surgery together. I mean, you've got that, to smartwatches and collecting the data, which they do for patients. And you can see it prevalent even in what we're facing today with coronavirus. Data is at the epicenter of that. We're collecting it faster. We're synthesizing it faster. The question is, how do you use it, and what tools do you use in order to do it? And that's the challenge for most companies.
Yep. Okay. So that we've talked about the current state as it is, and we're seeing all that's going on. And this comes back to the fact, when I did your intro, I said one thing: you're a hands-on individual and think outside of the box. How has that helped you in delivering complex intelligent technology projects? Any example that you can share?
Yeah, look, there's some, I think as the white hair shows here, you end up getting a deal of experience and wisdom by, osmosis. It happens. And failure brings the best out of doing that sometimes. And I think for many people that are sitting here today and wondering what is it that's important, And it's really taking a very pragmatic approach about what the outcome is for the customer and the business, and not losing sight of that. So we all get very excited about the customer experience and what we're trying to do in the change process. So, it's fantastic parking a car without touching the steering wheel. And it's fantastic having virtual reality goggles and doing things and faster. And, you hear it's the human race. We want to do things faster. We want to do it cheaper. We want to do it more reliable. But organizations rely on people being able to do all that, and it takes time. So a simple example that I use, before BI even existed and became the term that we have, and we started with, we all dealt with relational databases and spreadsheets, and I'm one of the first that dealt with Lotus and Quattro Pro when it used to take me half a day just to create a spreadsheet, let alone what they're doing today in instantaneous terms. You've got to go back and ask yourself always, what is that simple journey and outcome that you want to achieve? And it's the 80-20 rule. People, if you're a surgeon or you're doing financial reporting, you need a level of exactness. We all understand that. But in many cases, when businesses are driving outcomes, they're looking for directional things. They're looking for trends. They need to understand that they're going in the right way, right direction, that generally they're achieving the things that they need. So you don't need that level of exactness. So people need to start going away from the fact that you need to collect everything, synthesize everything, real time, everything else. And we all live in a day where managers are going to be on the phone asking, Angelo, have you got the result yet? I've been waiting a day, but you told me you got real time results. The reality of it is that we all sit on data and we miss some of the key things that we get out of those systems and various things that we do. And we've got to trust in the individuals and training the individuals to do that. And good companies do that. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't have in the news the banks having all these problems with leakages. Sometimes they lose sight of the key things in their businesses when they're looking at the minutiae. And we're living that sort of society. And I think we need to step back and let the systems do what they do, trust in them a little bit more, take some more risk. We're a very risk-averse society in Australia. And, we are being gazumped by other economies at the moment in that. And if you can take that simple approach and learn from that, I think that's important. The last thing I want to stress, especially for people that are doing business cases for technology and so forth, the good old CapEx is dying. Technology is now becoming obsolescent very quickly, as is our data. So the risk return and looking at how we leverage and enable technology is really important. So sometimes we need to lose money to make money. And there's going to be technology decisions that become a stepping stone for greater things. And this is where the real pressure is going to be for chief financial officers and risk officers and CIOs about how do we make sure that we keep true to that journey rather than putting on the next new shiny thing that fails or we spend millions of dollars at. And that's hard.
So you mentioned that we let the people do what they're good at doing. Where does, in this whole scheme of things, machines come and play a role? Well, when we talk about intelligent technologies, well, isn't that a lot of things could be automated? And do you think that will impact jobs going forward? As that is a question I've been asked all the time.
Oh, look, absolutely. Anyone that jokes themselves that things won't be different. I mean, even my career, I've had several jobs, several industries, several roles, and it will continue. And the span is shortening all the time. So my children are facing, as we all know, and we've all heard it, they'll probably do 3 or 4 or 5 or 15 things in their careers different. But I think what's important is embracing the technology in terms of how it could positively impact the workplace, because as we create these technologies, people forget, but we get then the new challenges. And lawyers and accountants are famous for this. We wait for new technology to come out because something will go wrong or something will be more complicated that we've got to spend more money on the legals, finances and risks in the back end of the business. So you've got this pendulum swing always where you've got the customer experience and sales on this side, and then suddenly on the other side you get the finance guys and legal guys, and you've got this constant swing all the time. So people are not going to be out of jobs. It's just going to be a question, how do you adapt to that changing technology, to the new job or the new role that you're going to have in the future? And that's going to be the challenge for every organization.
Okay. Well, we've got, just to let you know, we've got around about 10 people watching us at the moment live across the 3-4 platforms. I would request you guys to please shoot your questions so that we can ask Angelo if you've got any. He's got a very interesting career, and I think we can learn a lot from that. Okay, coming back to the questions, Angelo. what are the kind of challenges you see in the banking and finance sector that is making them hard to progress in this space and embracing? Because I have heard so many stories, and we've had a Royal Commission on together on top of it, and I think had they embraced intelligent technologies upfront, they wouldn't have gone to that kind of a situation. What is your opinion on that?
Look, my view on the things that are happening at the moment in the marketplace are less around technology, but more around process
Yep.
for the banks. And, when you're chasing the dollar and you're in a competitive environment and there's that much pressure, things can go wrong. And you're talking about organizations that are very, very large. I mean, it's hard enough managing my 3 kids and my wife managing me at the best of days, let alone managing companies that are 36,000 or 30,000 people here in Australia to the hundreds and millions of, that you've got internationally. I think what we need to do, and this is coming to the point that rather than using technology to find an outcome, use the technology to enable an outcome, but make sure that the people and the processes don't fall behind. And this is where the big, we talk transformation and all these sexy words. I mean, the reality of it is it's just change management and people keeping up and being happy with what they do and having confidence and trust in what they do. And this is where we can use AI and machine learning to do the checks and make sure that the risks are mitigated and use data in a better way, in a faster way, right? But that doesn't take away that the human being at the end of the day has got to make decisions around the output of that. I mean, we can't expect that because there's all sorts of nuances today around environmental causes, around what we do with people and how we treat them. I mean, we've got the Aged Care Commission, going on, and it has been going on with its outcomes. There'll be more coming in. I'm sure with this coronavirus, there'll be all sorts of issues around healthcare and the way we protect ourselves from viruses. How does that affect? It's affecting banking. It's affecting the whole industry. So in a nutshell, it's about being responsible about how we implement the technology, not just for technology's sake, and also incubating these things in a way that when we introduce them to the market or we introduce them to the business, that we don't cause a cavalcade of other problems. And I think that's where we're failing.
Okay. And that's where you're thinking that the banking sector is not doing things correctly?
Yeah, look, I think it's also a rate of change and pace. I mean, competition's changing banking a lot. I mean, these issues around information have been around a long time. And I mean, I'm going to be very honest and say that I think because we now have so much technology, we're bringing up all these issues far quicker that probably existed for a long time that we weren't aware of. And we're getting more knowledgeable, and we need to be. I mean, I'm not because I worked in banking, but we need to be kind to the bankers out there because they're struggling with these things and they are trying to find solutions, and they're all led from human. But at the similar time, we need society and the consumer to be giving constructive feedback back to the banks and back to the industry bodies about how they can improve things rather than just pointing the finger and saying we've got a problem. So there's an onus on both parties at the end of the day on how we use technology. And the new stuff, AI, blockchain, virtual reality and augmented reality, all these are making the customer more embedded with the people and businesses that they deal with.
So what is the role of the neobanks in all of this?
That's interesting. There is one of the things that's for sure is that we're finding a complete a breakup of a lot of the monoliths, and where you look at technology today, even in the technology space, you talk about the Googles and the Microsofts and the IBMs. But if you look at the AI space, which is very much related to what we do with data, you're finding a lot of niche specialists and specific task-orientated providers now that are taking those platforms and applying them to particular industries or particular problems. So what we're going to find even in banking, and they're not the only industry that will be affected in this, but I think because of their enormity and because they have the funds, we're finding it in there first. Banking and finance, healthcare, telcos are usually leading and bleeding edge in that case, is we're going to find that there's going to be a proliferation of more players in the market that are finding niches and chinks in there. In the old days, it used to be the credit unions. Now, we're finding, without mentioning companies, you could virtually put in neobanks in Google and you will get a list of about 50 of them at the moment. And that list will grow. So the problem for the consumer then is going to be is what is the role of the neobank? The other interesting thing that people need to know, of course, is that when you look at the owners of a lot of the neobanks, they are the major banks. They still sit behind them. So until the government actually relaxes the way that we do banking and it becomes more democratized and decentralized, the reality of it is that they're just players sitting in the background, still feeding off the majors. And that will change. There are a couple that are independent without naming them again, but we will see a change in the next few years, especially with the technology that's coming around, whether you're looking at the various payment platforms that you've got, blockchain platforms that are affecting an AI that's happening. So,
you just mentioned, that new banks are going to make, well, for consumers also will make the way they do business with the banks as well.
yeah.
But I'm thinking consumer now. Do the consumers also be thinking something different when they're dealing with neobanks? Should they be concerned? Is there anything that you think that is going to worry a consumer while going to a big bank where they know everything is safe? Going to a neobank should they have something in their minds?
That's
Any
a good
idea?
question. It's a really good question, Shelley, and it's a really hard one to answer because in the age that we're living in, and it's very much in our face at the moment, describe safety, whether it be health or banks or anything. I mean, I've lived through the GFC. I've lived through a number of recessions. As I grow older, I live through many more. The reality of it is that constructs that we have in society and these big pillars fall and rise and fall and rise, and it will continue to do. I think what we're finding is that there's a greater pace. You're finding now, even neobanks, I was reading on one this morning, I mean, they're now going outside of the banking realm and starting to introduce choices around insurance and purchasing vehicles and doing leasing, and they're doing a lot more. So the reality of it is that people are getting more choice because technology is allowing you to integrate in a whole number of industries and platforms that never were accessible before. So the big question for the consumer is going to be around trust. It's going to be around what is it that gives me confidence that I can get the best price and make sure that I don't get burnt. It's more so that I'm not exposed. Because as we know, in our parents' generation, they used to bank with one bank and they'd die with that one bank. They used to work with one employer and they'd probably have only one or two. The new generation now flips all the time, if not on a monthly or daily, basis. When they have credit card offerings, zero balance transfers, they get free trips and so forth. So I'd say to everyone, be very careful when you're reading through that. The reality is that we have good governance in this country, so that always helps. But always be wary that the new sexy thing has the backing and has the security that it offers you as a consumer. And it is different from player to player.
Okay, so we've talked about new technologies, we've talked about new banks. Where do you see all of that going? Where do you see us in 2025? 2025 is just around the corner. Where do you see ourselves in 2030?
Can I copyright this if I say anything? Just
if it's around the coronavirus, that is.
No, look, I wish I had a crystal ball and knew. Look, I think just looking at where technology is, there's a commoditization of many things in society. I think that there is a bridging and accessibility. I remember buying my first flat screen TV and it cost me $10,000, right? And the reality of it is I've got it in the garage collecting dust. I should get rid of it. But, the production of things and the rapid change of things is forcing people to then look at mediums that are, your computer now is basically a dumb terminal. You used to be worried about how much RAM you used to have and how much storage you used to have, and that's going. And I think that's happening the same, when you look at the medical industry now, the way that they save records and the way they go around the way that they look at particular, medical devices, or they're looking at solving particular viruses or illnesses. The whole way we're operating is changing. And I think the really big challenge, and I think the change in 2025 is we're going to find that there is going to be more access to various platforms, and the big monolith players that we used to know in the 80s and 90s are going to die. So I sort of end with everyone's probably very familiar with the diagram that you see on Facebook and YouTube, which shows the companies that are the biggest companies changing over time. Well, I've got a feeling that every month you're going to look at that, that's going to change. and it's going to change quicker, and there'll be new entrants all the time. So the whole mindset of how we purchase and how we consume goods is going to change because of technology. If I knew that, well, I'd be patenting it and making a lot of money with you, my friend, and a lot of other people that I trust in my life. But let's see.
Okay. Let's talk about some funny stories that you've seen. You've had interactions with all kind of people. When you're a CFO, you've spoken to CIOs. Where do you see a story where you had an ignorant C-level person talking about something? You said, well, what is he talking about? Share that with us.
I'll try to answer that. I don't know if it's funny. It's almost as sad. But the first thing I'd say is, in larger organizations that actually have the money and they have the brain power because they've got access to so many people and such an extensive network to vendors and government and so forth, they usually sit on the answers. They've got the answers. They know what it is. And I find it really amusing that they bring in a whole cavalcade of consultants and contractors in, trying to almost independently give them a pat on the shoulder that they're doing the right thing. And they could spend millions and millions of dollars doing that. And I find that amazingly in the larger organizations, that they almost trust the independent person more than the people internally, which is an anachronism in itself. In the smaller end of town, what you find is that they are so thinking about what they should be doing with technology next. You know, what sort of laptop fleet should they go to the cloud, whether they should use IoT technologies for particular businesses, that they procrastinate for so long that they don't do anything. And ironically, what you find is that there's a leverage point for a lot of companies where you can use the vendors and use a lot of consultants to do prototyping and show you a solution for free. They'll come in and say, well, try it. And people don't even do that because they're too scared to try it, because they're scared about a catch. So spend time. My advice to people generally is take the risk. In the bigger companies, back yourselves. Risk and return. You've got to try something or you're going to die looking at it. And we've worked in organizations where we've seen technologies, you know, at the bleeding edge, and then suddenly another 5 will come out and they've become a thing of the past. In the banking industry, that's prevalent. In the smaller organizations, look at the bigger ones, try things that are there, use community groups. There are a lot of people in community groups. And, you know, the funny story I will say is, you know, I've had companies where I go in there and they don't even understand that they've got the technology on their laptops. They don't even know that they've got access to it, and they're still doing everything manually. So invest in some training. Invest in some people to come in and look at what you do independently. After a year or two, you might actually discover you've got things that you're not even using and not leveraging. That's always a good point before you start ripping out things and putting new things in. Ask yourselves, am I using it properly? I mean, I still find things on my Kia car that I don't know. I press the button, I go, wow, does it do that? So, you know, I'll leave that thought for everybody that's online. How many things have you got in your businesses that you don't use? I mean, I've got 15 controllers at home, you know, for my TVs and smart stuff. And I can assure you, I find something new every day. So think about getting the best investment out of what you've got and then move forward to the next stuff.
Okay. You've had a very long career. So any exciting success?
Wait a minute, I've still got a few years yet.
Yeah, you've got a few years to go. Well, quite a few years to go, to be honest.
I hope so.
Any exciting success story that you would like to share with the audience, and any learning that you got from that? Anything that was as big as Ben-Hur and you said, well, that is my story of my life. And, you know, this is what I learned, and there's a learning for the audience to take away.
Look, it's funny for a bean counter to say that they're excited, right? Everyone's going to be laughing, I'm sure. Look, it's not so exciting, but fulfilling for me. Most of the things that I have a great legacy for is about when you give your employees and the customer an experience where they go, I enjoyed working on that project, or I saw the benefits and outcomes of that project that were real for me. They saved me time. They gave me greater trust in what I was doing. It was quicker. All those things are important. I've been involved in myriads of programs with international, multinational companies and vendors. And it's all about taking a very practical approach and being very honest about what you're doing. And my greatest legacy is that by having that approach and being very honest and upfront and taking a pragmatic view of what you need to do, you then are able to discount or promote solutions in the best way within a company. And by having people at the epicenter, make sure that they're on that way, that becomes so. I've done things with multinational printing companies and healthcare companies where you go in and they've been, working on a RFQ and RFP, just the physical writing of it for years. And they navel gaze. And sometimes it's about coming in, and people like myself and yourself, Shelley, and there's a lot of people like us out there that have got the scars and the experience. Leverage those people by giving you some insights about what's easy to do and what's hard to do. So you don't spend all that time navel gazing and worrying and not taking risks. And then it's a case of then having a very pragmatic approach about how you implement things. So my greatest legacy, it's about how you do it. It's not just the outcome, it's the journey. And if you've got a good journey, even when something fails, people will then trust you to try again. The worst thing is when people in a project, I'm sure a lot of people on the call today will be able to align to this. How many of you have been involved in projects which is an absolute disaster and you've never wanted to do it? And even when it's got a good outcome, you don't use it. So the reality of it is there's a lot of selling and marketing in doing these projects for technology. And if you can bring people along, you're going to get the right outcome. And unfortunately, we're dealing in an age now where there's so much technology out there that there's a lot of customers that just don't even want to touch the tools because they're so scared, and they pick up the phone and they ring the call center again, right? Yep. So we've got to ask ourselves, are we doing the right thing for the right outcome?
Okay. Okay, I haven't got any questions. I think everyone was listening and didn't ask any questions, but I've had a few of those. Anything you want to say to your audience and leave a message on, what do you want to say?
Oh, look, I think the most thing that I'm passionate about, I guess, as a technology lover and consultant, but also as a practical business person is, have more of these discussions with people, share ideas. And Shelley, your platform is perfect for that. I think the ability to share ideas and listen to people about their experiences is the greatest way to educate yourself and learn about things and have a thirst for trying. The great thing is we now live in an environment where you can do tries on particular software and applications online. Give opportunities to your young people to do that. We have a lot of good people out there that are in universities and in junior positions that we get them to do all the pleb jobs, and they would be, it would be wonderful to go to them and go, I'd like you to try this for us and give us your feedback. Use and leverage everybody that you've got in your community to take on that technology journey. And then technology just doesn't become technology, it becomes an enabler because people see it as something different. And it makes a really big difference, not only to the bottom line, which as a CFO, we all worry about. I worry about the people that are using it, our customers and the experience and what it does for employee engagement. And good companies do that really well.
Okay, I was lying and there were two questions. So the questions I will ask. But before that, you mentioned something and I thought I'll put you on the spot. You said, share the ideas. So tell me, if you were to think of an idea that is going to change the banking sector, be bold, what that idea would be that you would share. But don't take more than a paragraph, max.
Look, I think in one sentence, it's about how we interface with the customer. It's got to become more proactive in banking. The banks that take a proactive approach of telling people that things will change and giving them options rather than the customer reading about it or finding it out in an advert, that you treat your customer as you would your child or your parent or your partner, that you go, I've got an idea of how to make more money, save you more money, invest your money better, are going to be the companies and the banks that are going to make more money and be more successful. So you've got to be proactive rather than reactive. Most of the banks still today are reactive.
Okay, questions. The first question is from David Shorterstorm. Hi, David. David comes from Accenture. I know him from my good old Accenture days. His question, and a comment, very interesting conversation. Any perspective on the financial services sector and opportunities to build success in Australian technology startups at home and beyond Australia?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the great things is, whilst we're distant geographically and we have some challenges in what we do, we all know that there are some very smart minds, and we're used very largely, not only in banking, financial services, but a number of industries as an incubator. And I think there's a wonderful thing. And, we were chatting, Shelley, the other day. I mean, I was surprised. I was reading an article. Australia is the third largest economy for attracting tertiary students to Australia for education. So it means that we're actually attracting people that have got money and brains and the drive to actually excel themselves in the sectors that they study. So that is a perfect area that you can mine for people that can then input into technology decisions and the new technology sector we've got. I think that there's going to be a lot more of it coming out of Australia. The challenge for Australia and the government's going to be, how do we protect that and not lose it to other countries, or make sure that we invest enough money to make it something that is financially viable in any cause, because we lose a lot of it. You look at companies like Atlassian and a number of others in that, and that's the first company I mentioned in the last, but they're a perfect example of, wouldn't you love Atlassian to be Australia-based and doing everything out of Australia rather than doing it in the United States? And there's a number of them in the medical area and the telco area that have gone like that. So the challenge for us all is, how do we protect it and nurture it?
Okay. Second question from Syed Saifuddin Qazi. He's a SAP Fiori consultant. Well, before that, David, hope you got the answer to the question. If you've got any more questions, please put them in the comment section and I will make sure that Angelo responds to them. So the second question is from Syed Saifuddin Qazi, SAP Fiori consultant. He says, just enjoying your discussion, I would love to know how we can make the most of UX and IoT technologies in banking industry. Any business scenarios you've experienced where these technologies played instrumental role?
Oh, yes. Look, it's interesting because one of the, when Shelley and I were working together at a very large multinational IT company, we were dealing with AI and business intelligence tools. And I was dealing very closely with a major bank. And it was interesting because voice recognition, augmentation technology and AI, and even predictive analytics was really key, because call centers in the banks are huge and they have huge interfaces. Yet areas like the medical areas, especially hospitals, have been using this technology successfully in other countries and other continents. And it was about applying that technology. And I think the user experience is key, because, wouldn't it be great if you get a call from Angelo Koulos at a call center in a bank? First of all, by voice recognition, rather than asking the 50 questions I get every time I ask the bank, and I don't only get them once, we all experience this. I'll go through the phone. I need to put my customer number. I need to say my name. I need to say a sentence. And then they'll ask me all the same questions again when I get to the call center. And then whenever I go from one call center operator to the other, I need to give it again. So what may be one question has taken me 20 minutes. The UX part of it is about building the security and the integrity to give trust to those banks that they can do it right from the bat, just like I use my retina display or anything else to get access to my bank accounts. Why is it that I can get access to bank accounts, but I can't get access to the bank's people to get answers to my questions? Pose that question. Second thing is, why isn't it that they shouldn't be able to get a dashboard of all my information as soon as my name goes on, and not only solve my problem, but as a proactive, go, oh, Angelo, I noticed that your son's overseas, and you're spending a lot of money. Do you need a personal loan? Do you need a credit card for your son? Do they need foreign exchange? Do they need something? The fact that they even asked me that would be endearing to the bank and build the customer engagement score, which they all measure themselves on. So it's all these simple things that if they can put in some practices, technologists, if you can find those things and understand those processes, which is as easy as sitting down with a call center operator for a day, which I've done many times, you will find huge capabilities and abilities to apply your technology to those organizations.
Okay, good one. And I tell you, I deal with that every day. Every time I call a bank, first I have to first of all, I go through the app. So they've already recognized who I am. Then I reach there, and then they will ask me, they'll ask me 50 questions. And then, first of all, the voice enablement, where I will have to key in username, password, and everything. Right. And a person comes in and say, we recognized you, Mr. Kumar. please start with your date of birth. Well, hang on a minute. We just did that twice. So now it's the
And
third.
Shalindra, it gets worse because you're Indian, I'm Greek, and our names are about the alphabet long, and they don't even allow us with voice recognition to say them because they can't understand them. So if you're driving and you're doing that on a hands-free, you've got to physically type your name, you've got to hang up the phone. So you've got all sorts of issues.
Well, that's a very good one, actually. Every time I call a call center, I call a call center and get to that automated voice enablement system, and they would say, which part of the business do you want to go to? Is that technical support, sales? And
Yep.
you said technical support. He said, please repeat again. Technical support, please repeat again. So you do that 5 times before you actually get there. And then the other person will say, well, can you please spell your name? And that is a big challenge because my dad did a very good favor to me with such a long name. So I will start with S-H-A-I. So can you please slow down? Okay, again, let's start again. So it's a kind of a user experience that we have.
So voice recognition and that whole area of technology is improving, and it's becoming, I mean, when I was looking at, they call it now computer vision, right? So, when you go to Woolies, for example, now, and I'm using Woolies, Coles has it as well. In the good old days, my sons used to joke that, Dad, just press it as an onion, but it's an avocado. But the technology is now smart because it actually takes an image and recognizes what it generally can be. And on the screen now, you actually get choices. So you sort of look at the screen and go, they know it's not an onion. I've got to type in at least an avocado or a cucumber because they know it's green. That stuff will get better and better. So, the reality of it is it will improve. It's frustrating, but I think this is where banks need to get simple. It's better that a person waits 5 minutes and talks to a human being and gets an outcome rather than having the sexy menu recognition and voice recognition and anything else that you do and choose, and it takes you 15 minutes, you lose customers. So that's where they just need to get smart about the practicalities of balancing technology with process.
Okay. Last question I will take. A very dear friend of mine, an ex-colleague from Accenture, again, I cannot leave that question. So, question from Ritesh Mohan. His question is, what is your take on regulatory tsunami and what steps should banks take to overcome it?
It's an area that I fortunately and unfortunately have a lot of experience in. So I dealt with the regulators like APRA and ASIC on a daily basis when I was working in my positions in the banks. Tsunami is a really strong word. It's like pandemic with coronavirus. It comes and goes, and some people perennially suffer from illness of regulation in banks every single second of the day. So my answer to it is it comes in waves. And the challenge for banks is about how they react to those particular issues and breaches and whatever they are. And as I noted before, they're probably problems that existed a long time ago, but technology and process and information is now driving them to the top far quicker than what they did before, which is a good thing for all of us. But, we're finding that the enormity of them is coming to the surface. So the thing that I think is important is to stay calm about how we go about solutions for this, is really searching of what the crux of the problems are. And a lot of them are people orientated. They're not technology alone. And it's about coming up, especially for consultancies, about how you manage not only the technology, but the risk and the delegation of authority processes that you have. I mean, I'm going to stand on this, and this is controversial, but we all like to think that the CEOs who get sacked are the ones that should be culpable at the end of the day. But all of us have worked in large organizations and know that no machine, nothing in a household works from one individual. There are many. And the question becomes, how do we as consultants and technologists help to prevent these things from occurring, or informing them in a better way so they can change and put solutions in place? We live in a society that don't do that. We finger point. It's all very exciting when we find a problem, but not many people spend time finding the solution, or they walk away from it because you almost feel diseased. And I think that's the balance. Technologists need to come in, not only provide solutions, but explain what the impact is and what they expect. This is a really important point I'm passionate about. How many projects fail because companies are not ready for the technology change? It's the same thing when things go wrong for regulation. Is the company actually ready to take that new change and that new level of technology to solve the problem? And sometimes you need to actually stare the executive in the eye and go, listen, mate, you've got to make that change in your business first before we're going to be successful in deploying the technology. And that's not an easy discussion to have.
Perfect. Thank you, Angelo. Thank you very much for all the answers to the questions. We've had, we slotted 30 minutes. We are 45 minutes and above. And thank you for your time.
We're Greek and Indian. We take time. Thank you to everybody. I'd like to thank Shelley as well. And guys, please hit us up on LinkedIn and so forth. We don't have all the answers, but like I said, a good conversation helps everybody. So please keep the networking up. And thank you very much for your time. And thank you, Shelley.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was Angelo Koulos, a great friend of mine with lots of stories, and they can't get over very quickly. So what I'm thinking is we will try and get him again back in a 2-3 months time from here. But thank you all for taking your time and watching the episode of The Shaily Show. I'll be back next week again with another episode of The Shaily Show and other series as well. So please like this particular episode so people can watch and learn from Angelo's insights. And furthermore, follow me so that you get alerted next time I have a show on. So bye from now. Thank you very, very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in